The Prepper Podcast, episode 38.
We've got to know whether or not their president's a crook.
The American people would never vote for socialism. He said, under the name of liberalism, the American people will adopt every fragment of the socialist program.
The Prepper Podcast is an up-to-date survival podcast based on military, wilderness, and modern-day survival and may be found at theprepperpodcast.com. I am Ken Jensen, and this is the podcast about everything survival. My goal is to teach you strategies on self-reliance and to develop survival skills and critical thinking in everyone, resulting in a more resilient yet more enjoyable life. This is episode 38, and it's going to be a good episode. I know I say that all the time, but it really is going to be a good episode. Today, we're going to talk about the different alternative energy sources, both viable and non-viable. All right, what we have, and this is part of a series that I've been doing on battery banks and things like that. So now we're talking about what we're going to put into the battery bank as far as power goes and stuff like that. So what we have discussed is low power consumption or energy use of your home, considering which alternative power option works for you, what you need to know about batteries and battery banks, everything you need to know about inverters, and many other items that we need to create a great battery bank. So the show notes for today's episode would be at theprepperpodcast.com/038, or that is theprepperpodcast.com/alternative energy. I started adding these links like this so that it's easier for you guys to find it later on if you decide to go back to the show notes. So you can go to either /038 or you can go to /alternative energy. Either one, whichever one's easier for you to remember, you can go ahead and do that. All right, there's going to be absolutely no news segment today. There's not going to be a news segment for at least the next month. I guess you guys have not given enough feedback to Jay Bradbury to let him know how incredibly important he is. Now, I'm joking around a little bit, but the real reason why he is taking a little bit of time off is because he's got a lot of projects coming together. All right. I guess people have decided that he's a valuable source and he is inundated with projects and things to do. So while he's doing that, we are going to have to deal without his services as our news anchor, and we'll get by with that. I mean, we've done it for many episodes before he came along. However, I really do enjoy his episodes, and I hope he hurries on and comes back. Now, if you guys want him to show up on the next couple episodes, then I recommend you go over to his website. That is Prepare PDX. That's Papa Delta X-Ray. That's preparepdx.com. If you go over to his website, leave him some feedback or comments or something like that, and tell him you want him back on theprepperpodcast.com, okay? Make sure that you do that, and I'm sure that we could strong-arm him into coming back. All right, so if you would like to be a guest on the Prepper Podcast, go to theprepperpodcast.com/guests and fill out the form. And if you would like to just leave a little bit of feedback, you can go to my website and you can click on the green banner that's on the right side, and you'll get a little pop-up that where you can set it to record. Now, the other way to do feedback is to call me at 978-KNOWS-IT. That's 978-KNOWS-IT, or that's 978-566-9748. All right, now I do have a little bit of feedback from you guys. So remember, you can call me for feedback. You can visit my website. It makes much better content to have an audio, okay? But this one came in as feedback by email. So let's get started on the feedback. It is from Julian, and I don't know what state he's from. All right. His email read something like this. Should I hunker down in my home and protect my family? How do I prepare? How do I fortify? Do I bury some supplies in the yard? Well, when I emailed him back, I basically told him, look, I'm not real big on burying caches and stuff like that, but if you do want to have some stuff buried, now, I do believe in doing this to some degree, okay? So don't get me wrong, but I'm not, you come to my house and you're not going to go out there and just find a bunch of caches in the ground and stuff like that, because I don't really believe in burying a ton of stuff in the ground. Just a few things. So I will have a link on the show notes that you can go to, and I talked about PVC survival caches that you can do for like small cylindrical long items, maybe even like a rifle or shotgun. And I also did one for the 5-gallon buckets. So you can use those for your caches, and they make really good ones because they're plastic and they'll last forever as long as the sun's not on them, which the sun's not going to be on them if they're in the ground. And they will hold a lot of material. And I prefer the bucket caches for things that I've got to get to quickly. You can get the lid off, you can get to your stuff, and then you can bug out. So it's a good thing to have like in the woods when you know that's the direction you're going to take. You open up the cache and you bug out. And the next thing for the PVC, that's more of a permanent thing, things that you'd want to keep close by your home. All right. Now, for fortifying and stuff like that, I also have talked about home security on the prepperpodcast.com/023. And you can also find that now at theprepperpodcast.com/non-lethal weapons. Okay? Home security systems. We need to make sure that we have a home security system, and we need to make sure that that home security system sign is in the front yard. It doesn't matter. That sign will deter more people than even video cameras and stuff like that, because you can have video cameras, but they can probably get away before anybody knows that they're there. If an alarm is there, then that's going to deter a lot of them from even hitting your home. So you have that sign, and you have a less chance of even getting hit. Having cameras. Cameras is a good thing. I just mentioned that. You can see their faces. There's this thing called a drop camera that I heard about that you can use for security, and it's basically a Wi-Fi camera, and it connects to the internet. So that's a really cool thing to have. You can have those around. They're kind of expensive, but they're kind of neat too, and they're HD, and you can save like if you're paying for like a premium membership at Drop Camera, try dropcam.com or something like that, or just Google Dropcam. You can use that, and it's going to give you HD video, and if you're paying for a premium membership or whatever, then you can save that stuff in HD. So that's pretty cool. Also, false cameras. They have false cameras that look just like the real thing. There are some cheaper ones that don't, but there are a lot of false cameras that look just like real cameras. They have all the components and stuff, and the only thing is they don't have the electronics inside. But everything that they do have that you can see, it looks exactly the same as the rest of them. Another thing, a medium to large dog. Now, I'm going to hurry through this, so just go back to the show notes or go to episode 23 of the Prepper Podcast if you want to know more information. Have a medium to large size dog because the bark is scary. Have an LED false TV because if they think the TV's on, they think there's an insomniac home, and they probably won't want to go in. You can also look at automating your lights to come on and off throughout the night. You should also have good door locks. And then there's a thing called a buddy bar, which is a door jamb that will keep them from kicking your door in. There's 3M window film that will keep them from busting windows out. It won't stop them from being able to get through, but it will hold them back a lot. Okay, tack strips at every entrance. So you can have these strips down at every entrance. So if they come in, they're going to end up getting stabbed with these tack strips. And then you can have some defense weaponry. Now, in the defense weaponry, I'm just going to say, get firearms, get shotguns and a sidearm. Every person in the house that's, let's say, 15 or above, they should be able to use a shotgun and a sidearm, and they should be able to protect their home. They should also know how dire the situation needs to be before they have to use that, and that there are legal ramifications for everything that they do. But I recommend 20-gauge youth model shotguns with tactical bodies or with tactical stocks placed on them. So now we can get into the actual discussion. All right, so let's talk about the different types of solar, or actually let's talk about the different types of alternative energy. Solar is just one of those. And speaking of solar, that's going to be the first one I talk about. There are many different ways that you can grab solar energy for use in your home. And the different types are the voltaic, thermal, light, and there's another one that I'll get to later. So we'll talk about that here in a minute. Instantly, when I say solar power, I know that the first thing that comes to your mind is solar voltaics or a solar panel array, solar cells. Everybody visualizes a home with tons of panels. You want solar power, you've got to spend a bunch of money. You got to put solar panels all over your roof pointing at the sun, and you can have all the power you need. You can keep consuming power the same way that you always have been, and you can also lower your carbon footprint. By the way, if I hear anybody say lower carbon footprint, I instantly, even if they are the smartest person in the world, I instantly downgrade their knowledge a couple points because they said low carbon footprint. So don't use that word whenever talking to me. But people visualize a home with tons of panels, and it allows them to keep a high consumption of electricity and stay 100% comfortable, but they lower, quote unquote, lower their carbon footprint. The pros of solar voltaic, because believe it or not, I do like solar voltaic. The pros of having solar panels is resiliency. So if you're wanting a system that will allow you to be resilient when the grid goes down or whatever, then solar panels are definitely a way to get there. It will allow you to have power. They are simple in construction. Matter of fact, basically, if you have this substrate material, and they're even trying to make paint for it now. If you have this material, you can connect a wire on both sides, and so basically you've got a little square cell that you put, and then you connect a wire on each side, and it will give you voltage. And then that voltage is going to be tied into a series of them, and the series of those cells will provide you enough power to recharge your battery. So it's very simple in construction. There's do-it-yourself information all over the web on how you can set up your own solar array. It's awesome technology for small-scale applications. This is the big key here. I love small-scale applications. All right, the small-scale applications are stuff like, a shop or a chicken house or an electric fence, something like that. Small applications, small individualized things. Solar panels are a really great option. I really like them for that. All you need is a small panel, then one marine battery, and you can use it for whatever application you need. They are almost maintenance free. Most of them will go 20 to 30 years without any maintenance on them because they don't have moving parts. The only problem with solar panels is they get a little bit hot, and you can cause problems with the amount of heat that is created. But for the most part, they are maintenance free. All you've got to do is wipe down the glass to keep the most amount of sun going in as possible. The problems with solar panels. You knew I was going to go to this. The problems with solar panels is that when the sun is gone, they don't do anything. When the sun is low, they don't do much. When the sun is left or right, when the sun is east or west, they don't produce very much power at all. They only produce power when the sun is above and directly on them. The way that you can get rid of this issue is to put your solar panel on a turntable, a powered turntable with a sensor showing sun. So once the sun is seen by the sensor, then it will stop rotating. That is the only real way to get full power throughout the day. And then you still have nighttime that you don't have full power. So where did the sun go? Where did the power go? They're expensive. They're very expensive. Per watt, they are one of the more expensive ways of getting alternative energy. Here's the thing. Anything that you can buy at the store typically is going to be pretty darn expensive to buy at the store or to make. So a lot of the best things that you're going to find throughout this episode or this podcast, a lot of things you're going to find are going to be things that you don't typically think about buying. So it's expensive. It's very expensive. To do a normal house with normal consumption, it's going to cost you about $20,000. For the panels, it's going to cost you about another $10,000 to $20,000 for all the batteries and inverters and everything else. So it is really expensive, and it's not truly sustainable. All right, if you're wanting to be self-sustainable, it's not that big a deal for you to go and buy a bunch of solar panels and then for you to buy a few more and stock them up and learn how to fix them, things like that. That's fine. But typically, it is not a sustainable process that is being used for the solar panels. The amount of work and energy that is put into creating a solar panel and then shipping the solar panel and all this other stuff, the amount of energy required to produce the solar panel it's generally more than what you're going to get over the life of that panel. Now, we have tax dollars going to government programs that subsidize the generation and the purchase of solar panels. So it's made a little bit cheaper for you, but it's still not a sustainable thing. It is not a sustainable practice to have solar panels, but it is a self-sustainable way of doing things. But they also, each one lacks sufficient production as you reach north and south. So if you are in Canada, you are not going to get near the production that I'm going to get here in the United States. If you are going to be even higher if you're going to be higher toward the North Pole or even further toward the South Pole, then you're not going to get very much solar exposure at all. And there's a problem with that. The problem with that is that everything is really low and your solar panels are not going to get much. And even if you compensated for the angle of the sun and you moved your solar panels more vertical so that the sun is directly on those solar panels, the issue you're going to run into is the fact that that sun goes through more atmosphere, so there is less energy from the sun that is reaching that location, even if you don't know it. So it lacks sufficient production as you reach the two ends of the Earth, the North and South Poles. The efficiency already is low. Typical efficiency is 12 to 18%, and the best that I've actually seen people quoting is 21.5%. All right, so 21.5% is the best. You can add large focal lenses, which can be expensive, but if you add large focal lenses, then you can intensify the sun, you can make it, you can raise this efficiency a little bit better. I don't know how much. It's going to raise it up quite a bit. It might be worth it. It may not. I can't tell you that. But after about 10 years, then 90% of that, or it's only about 90% efficient. So let me kind of rephrase this. Of the 21.5% efficiency, only 90% of that is left. Okay, so if you do the math, just real quick math, it's only about 19.5% or 19% efficient after 10 years. And then after 20 years, it's going to be probably about 16% efficient because it's only 80% of its overall efficiency after 20 years. So new, 21.5. Old, let's say 19 after 10 years. And then we're going to say about 16 or 17 after 20 years. And it's going to take a minimum of 10 years to pay that back. To pay the purchase price back to you, it's going to take a minimum of 10 years to pay that back. Adding large focal lenses, like I said, will intensify it, but it is what it is. Generally, you're gonna incur a cost of about 60 cents per watt. That's right, about 60 cents per watt. And like I said, they do last quite some time. They last about 25 to 40 years. So how are you going to mount your solar panels if you get one? You have a fixed rack that you can just put on the ground, or you can put it on your roof or whatever. And then you have roof mounting, which is actual elevated mounting for your roof. And then you have racks that you can put on your roof that are meant for the rooftop. And then you have solar trackers. This is what I was talking about. This is where you have a sensor that can see the sun, and as the sun intensity goes up, it slows down, and as it's directly on the sun, it stops. This is a solar tracker, and it will give you the most exposure, and it may be worth getting. The best options for solar energy, though, is solar thermal. Because with solar thermal, you're going to get the most efficiency out of your solar energy, because it's already coming in the form of radiation, so using radiant heat is a no-brainer. I mean, you can stand out in the sun, and it's going to make you hot. So if you want to harvest that heat, you can do that. You can use all of that heat for hot water. You can use it for solar heating systems for your home. So, and there's even parabolic devices that you can use. The idea that I had for a parabolic device was basically using, if you take a long fluorescent light, one with a reflective backdrop, that is meant to spread the fluorescent light down. But what it's also great for is to catch light coming in and direct it toward the center. So basically, you're just using the mirror advantage in the opposite direction, and it works very well. So you can use that to intensify the sunlight on whatever you're trying to heat. Now, solar heating systems for the home, there are ways that you can make this just using tin cans. There's other ways to do it with copper, and there's even ways to do it with PVC. But solar heating with your home is a really good option. Hot water, and by the way, the next episode of the Prepper Podcast, I will be talking about a lot of these in a little more detail. And then hot water, it's kind of the same idea as the hot air. You throw something on your roof and you heat your water from the sun rays. You can also use thermal masses to maintain the temperatures you use it to maintain temperatures in your greenhouses. You use it in your sheds or in your homes, things like that. You can blow hot air through these thermal masses, heat them up throughout the day. Then at night, when it's nice and cool, then it's going to keep your home a little warmer. But during the day, it's going to be a little cooler, so it can also cool your home down during the day when it's a little hot. So thermal masses are a great thing. The more thermal mass you have, the longer it takes to heat something up and the longer it takes to cool it down. So it's kind of like being underneath a mountain, right? That's a lot of thermal mass. So it basically maintains the same temperature at all times, only fluctuating by a couple degrees throughout the year. So thermal masses are really a key thing if you're really looking at sustainable living. Now, you can use the sun to cook as well. All right, there are solar ovens, which all that is it's a very well insulated container with a clear top. And there's even how-tos for your children to make solar ovens out of pizza boxes. And solar ovens do a really good job at cooking stuff, and a lot of them will get to several hundred degrees. And you'll have, usually they're painted black inside, and then they have reflectors on the front. You can make sun tea. I love tea. I'm a Southern guy, so I love sweet tea, and I love sweet tea made from sun. The sun makes great sweet tea. And then you can also use sun drying or dehydrating. You can do that on like window screen material, stuff like that. You can make a dehydrator box with a fan that blows air through it. You can dehydrate pretty much anything with the sun, that you could with a dehydrator, and it'll take substantially less energy. You just got a little blower. You can also use the sun for water purification. I actually did a post on the Clever Survivalist about water purification, but you can use the SOTUS method. And that's the post that I did. Basically, you're going to take a PET or peat bottle, and that bottle is going to be put on your it's going to be something with reflectors. I use reflectors to reflect the UV rays. It's not heat that does it. Heating up the water is a good thing, but it's not the heat that does it. This doesn't get chemicals out, but the SOTUS method will actually, and that's SODIS. The SOTUS method uses the UV rays from the sun to kill the bacteria in the water, and it works well. And the reason why peat bottles are used is because they leach less material. If you want to know what a peat bottle is, go and get you a Coca-Cola or Dr. Pepper in a bottle. That's pretty much it. Get a 2-liter bottle. Even the small ones, it's peat or PET material. This isn't the stuff that had the polybicarbonates in it, okay? Now, you can also use evaporation and condensation. Evaporation, let's say you put salt water in a basin, and you want to put a transparent material on top, and then inside that basin you also need to have a smaller container. And let's say you have it set up where you can put a weight in the center. It's going to evaporate the salt water up until it hits the transparent material, and when it collects on the transparent material, it will all gravity feed down toward the center, and it will drop into the smaller container. So you'll have fresh water in the smaller container, and you'll be stuck with salt on the outside basin. And this is going to give you good water from salt and brackish water. Now this will probably get rid of a lot of the chemicals and stuff in the water, but I can't promise you that it'll get rid of all the chemicals in water. Okay, so those are the main types of water purification. You can use clotheslines. Use the sun to dry your clothes. Then you can use the sun for lighting. All right, we already know that you got solar panels, but what about the little solar lights? Right? You can use solar lights. You can use bottles of water. Now, this may not make sense to you. You can use bottles of water for light. Let's say you got a shed or something like that, and if you set this up right, you can do this properly. What you will do is you will put water in the bottle, fill it to the top, and then you will take this bottle, and you can do the same thing. I like doing the same thing with mason jars. But then you got to put a hole in the roof, okay? but you need to make sure that the roof is not going to leak. It's very important that you don't have a leaky roof because it will destroy the inside of your home. So you're going to have to get the right kind of flashing material, stuff like that. But the sun will hit the bottle and it will refract the light every which way. And it will create a nice glow inside of a room. So if you wanted some cheap solar lighting inside of your shed, you could use this method. All right, so that's pretty much the end of the solar. I'm going to have to kind of push through this a little bit because we're already at about half an hour. So you got wind. That's the next one that I'm going to talk about. And there are really two types. It's commercial and residential. All right, and within the commercial and residential, you've got propeller type and what I call the jet type, which is, it's still really just a propeller type, but it's inside of a housing instead of just being three props sticking straight out from a center point. All right, the thing about wind is constant wind is going to be required, and it's usually an intermittent power source. The issue is if you are in an area that has low wind, a lot of them require so much wind before you can push them over. Now, usually I think it's about 12 mile per hour wind. So if you're in an area that gets more than that, then a lot of times you're going to be able to generate power. But if you don't have that, then wind may not be what you want. But you look at a map that talks about the wind energy, but you happen to live on the side of a mountain, right beside a valley. And that valley funnels all the wind, and that wind comes up the side by your house. That wind is a sustainable wind. The thing is you have to understand that you're going to need a storage as far as batteries and stuff like that go. You're going to need storage. And with that storage, I would recommend always supplementing your power with something else like photovoltaic or something like that for your electric generation. So I really do think that wind is a good option. I actually prefer, if you can do it, I like the wind option over photovoltaic, but even with that, I would always supplement it with a photovoltaic source as well. And then I would have a big enough battery bank to last me throughout the night at normal consumption, but obviously you're not going to be using it at normal consumption. Generally, how a wind turbine works is it's going to use kinetic energy of the wind and turn that into rotational mechanical energy. Okay, so it's not super efficient, but it works well because of the abundant source. The mechanical energy that is created by a wind turbine can be used in windmills, which is usually to turn gears and stuff like that, which a lot of times it'll be used to grind grains and do other work to pump water, things like that. And speaking of pumping water, we've got pumps. You can power pumps from a mill. It's a wind-powered pump. All right, say that 3 times fast. Generators. You can use a wind turbine on a small generator, and that generator will charge your batteries. All right, and I also have a neat idea on this that I'll be covering soon. Now, when it's considered what is small scale versus what is large scale, just think 50 kilowatts. If you are less than 50 kilowatts for what you're looking at doing, then you're considered a small scale operation. Greater than 50 kilowatts is considered large scale operation. The one that I've researched the most is the Honeywell WT6500, and there's another company that basically makes the same thing. So I think that all it is Honeywell is rebranding the Windtronics version. They are calling it a Honeywell WT6500, but I think the manufacturer is really going to be Windtronics because it's the exact same thing. And I have a YouTube video link on there if you want to see what I'm talking about, but that seems to be the favorite among people nowadays. It's pretty good size, but if you look at it, there's a reason that people have this as their favorite. It's a really good option. The next type is going to be geothermal. Geothermal energy is it's a different beast, and it's quite a bit of work, but I mean it can be used. Anyways, generally what you think about with geothermal as far as residential, you're just thinking about coils under the ground. You can do that, but a lot of the industrial uses is like geothermal steam engines and stuff like that. They dig deep into the ground, and usually they're doing this stuff close to like where the tectonic plates and stuff are. They're going to take and they're going to drill way down, and they're going to get the heat off of that. So that's kind of how the industrial uses are. I mean, that's how the industry uses it. But as far as your home, yeah, you're going to use a geothermal heat pump. You're going to pump it, underneath your home or whatever, and it's going to go through the ground. If you're several feet under the ground, then the air that comes out of the other side or water. It depends on how you want to use it, but the air or water coming out of the other side should be relatively close to what it is in the ground, which is going to be cooler than the summer heat, and it's going to be warmer than the frigid ice cold winter. So geothermal is a good way to use thermal mass, like I told you earlier, to use thermal mass to your advantage. So you can throw this under your home. Or if you're building a home and you've already got to dig in order to put down the foundation, well, then why don't throw down some pipes for thermal use? I don't know that I would want to dig a lot for thermal use on a house that's already existing. But if a house hasn't been built yet and you're planning on building a house, I would definitely look at to throwing in some thermal tubing and stuff so that you can use that for your home, because it's fairly inexpensive to do since you're already digging anyways. Another way that people do is they'll take a geothermal coil, or they'll just take the material that they use for geothermal, and they'll throw it in the bottom of a deep pond or a lake or something like that. And that's a really good option for ease. It's very easy to do that as long as you're fairly close to that pond, because that pipe could go a long ways. Now, what you could do is you could run the pipe underground about a foot all the way to the pond, and then throw it in the bottom of the pond. A big coil of the piping and stuff like that, throw it in the bottom of the pond, and you can bring whatever you're using, air or water, you can bring that into your home. So that's the other option. That's the more viable option for a home that's already there. But it's also a really good option for like a camping cabin, isn't it? So I've got a link in my show notes to kind of show what I'm talking about. I have a blog post, and I'm going to link to that blog post in my show notes under the heading of geothermal. So the next one that preppers are really big on, other than photovoltaic, is hydroelectric, and they're the micro hydro guys. Now, hydroelectric is already accounting, I think, for about 30% of our total. I'm just shooting this number off the top of my head. I'm not sure that I'm 100% accurate, but I think it's somewhere around 30% that hydro is our current energy production. You got dams and stuff, so you're going to dam up a lake, and you're going to raise the level of the lake, and whenever you need more energy, you open it, you put more through your turbines. You turn turbines on, and they generate more electricity. So hydro is definitely a viable option, and it is used a lot in industry. Microhydro is very efficient. This is probably one of the most efficient types of solar energy. This is like one of the most efficient that you can use. The problem is that you've got to be close to running water. It's going to require water to be able to fall so that you can turn the energy of the falling water into the mechanical rotation of the turbine. So you require water to fall. If you're at a stream, then you may be able to combine something. You may be able to figure something out to create a waterfall. You're just going to have to figure it out. Microhydro is also going to be one of those that you're going to use with other sources, because unless you're right by a stream or something like that, then you're probably not going to get constant. You're probably not going to get constant. But you you've got the rainy months. The rainy months are going to provide you with a nice constant flow. But then you've got the dry seasons, and the dry seasons aren't going to provide you with as much. So, once again, you're going to need other sources. Now, I, once again, like using the microhydro with photovoltaic because when the sun's out, then you may be in a season in which there isn't a lot of rain. But when there's a lot of rain, you're in a season in which there's probably not a lot of sun. So, what does this do? This provides you with two complementary methods of generating electricity. Note that I'm talking about electricity there. But microhydro can also be used. This is the really cool idea I was telling you about earlier with the wind, the wind generator or the wind pump. If you use a wind pump, you can pump water out of a pond or something like that into a storage tank that is elevated. And that storage tank is for backup power generation. You can use that storage tank that's elevated for hydropower. So essentially what you're doing is creating a water version of a battery. Now isn't that kind of neat? And it kind of keeps you from having to buy a huge amount of batteries. So when it's a windy day, you're going to pump water up to this storage facility while you're generating electricity using wind. But then when it's not windy, you can have a controlled flow of water coming out of the tank back into the pond or wherever you put it, coming out of the tank, going through your turbines, and now you've got micro hydropower from the tank. That, I think, is a pretty cool use. Another pretty cool use is to use the hydro. You can, as you're going to collect water anyways, you can use a hydro turbine on your downspouts. That's kind of an interesting idea. There's a way to create it in like a 5-gallon bucket, and all it'll do is slow the water down just slightly as it starts turning the generator. But if you get a lot of rain, then this is going to provide you with a lot of power while it's raining. So that's another way to do it. And then there's, for the other hydro, there's tidal energy, which is basically just big turbines in the water. So as the tide comes in, the turbine turns one way. As the tide goes out, the turbine turns the other way. And it's based on the moon and stuff like that. So it's not really viable for most people. But I guess if you live right at the ocean and you have a large difference in tide, if you're not some area that's got a little bit of tide flow, but if you're in an area that gets a lot of flow when there's a tide, then you might consider putting a prop in the ocean and trying to do like a micro tidal turbine. So the next thing I'm going to talk about is it's a whole collection. I just kind of threw it all together. It's biomass, biogas, wood, and methane. Let's talk about wood. All right, the first thing is burning wood. Everybody knows that you burn wood. So you can use a wood stove. You can use a wood stove to heat. You can use a wood stove to cook. You can use a rocket stove to heat, or you could use a rocket stove to cook. Now, a rocket stove to heat is going to be a rocket mass heater. It's not really going to be a rocket stove. It's basically a rocket stove on its side with a lot of exhaust going into a thermal mass. That would make a rocket mass heater. Wood is the true solar energy. The sun gives us radiant energy in the form of UV rays. And then the plants convert that energy into a usable energy for the plant. The usable stored energy within a tree is then easily converted into fire, which will give us a lot of thermal energy. And it's converted also into the next thing I was going to talk about. It's converted into a decomposition, which will give us other forms that we can readily use in different scenarios. So let's talk about the decomposition of the wood. You can actually create, and this is going to be decomposition of all kinds of biomass. Okay, I'll come back to the wood, but you can create methane. You can create methane out of rotting organic matter. It's an anaerobic decomposition, and this is a really good way to unlock solar potential. Your solar energy has now been given in methane. It's also going to give you carbon monoxide, but carbon monoxide is also it's a high energy burning fuel. So if you're burning the carbon monoxide, it's not going to become a problem. So if you do rotting organic matter, or if you have cattle, manure is another really good way to create methane. Now back to the wood. It's the most cost effective, okay, because if you truly replenish the wood that you are putting out, that you're taking out of the forest, well, first thing, you can take the fallen branches and use that. Once you're out of that, you start chopping wood. As you chop the wood, you're going to replace the trees. And a lot of times, these oak trees and stuff, they're going to replace it for you anyways. So as long as you're not using a lot, then it's going to be able to sustain itself for you. So the next thing we're going to cover is ethanol. If you have anything that's high in starch, you got bread, sugar. Believe it or not, bread has just as much energy in it as raw sugar. So per gram, bread has the exact same amount of energy as raw sugar, and it gets converted into raw sugar in your body. That's why bread is so bad for you. All right, so you can actually create ethanol from anything that is high in starch, and it has a high glycemic index in your body. You're just going to decompose it, and then you're going to distill it, and basically making moonshine or vodka. You're going to basically be making vodka as you distill this. So if you add like half ethanol and half gasoline to your car, you can actually use that. You can use that in a gasoline engine. Half ethanol, half gasoline, without any conversion, you can use it in your vehicle. And I am not an auto manufacturer, but I'm just telling you something that I believe to be a truth. Half ethanol, half gasoline does fine in a gasoline engine. And if it starts to choke up on you a little bit, then just reduce your ethanol a little bit. Go a quarter ethanol and 3/4 gasoline, and you'll be able to figure it out. Now, gasoline's got a lot of water in it too, so don't think that ethanol puts a lot of water. Actually, like the heat and stuff like that, the additives that you put in your gas can, most of those, I think it's the red bottle, most of those are just ethanol. And those are actually used to de-water your gas. So by adding ethanol, you're actually just doing the same thing that you're using to boost your gallons per hour or whatever using that heat. The next thing, since we're basically talking about fuels, remember ethanol can be used in a lot of different things. And if you're in the right state and it's legal to do this, you can actually create it for consumption. But if you're in a state that is not legal, I cannot condone that you use it in that way, and you will probably just have to use it for fuel. Now, like I said, I'm talking about automobile stuff now, so let's go over to biodiesel. Biodiesel is basically made from used cooking oil or animal fat. Now, you're going to take this material, you're going to strain out all the crap, and you're going to put it into another container. And in that container, you're basically going to heat it up, and you're going to mix it. And you're going to add, essentially, that grease, methanol, and lye. Now, there's a slurry that you can buy that's methanol and lye mix and stuff like that. The product of that is it's going to separate into the biodiesel and glycerin. Okay, and if you know uses for glycerin, then there you go. All right, so the next thing we're going to, and biodiesel, can be used in any diesel vehicle. Next thing is hydrogen or fuel cells. I don't like people that do hydrogen and fuel cells because it's expensive, it's unsustainable. It usually takes more power than it creates by converting into hydrogen. Fuel cells are not they're not very efficient. They're horrible in efficiency. I don't like it as an alternative fuel. I really don't like it. But what you can use in place of that is you could use natural gas instead. If you have natural gas going into the intake of an engine, it can actually burn. You will put it basically where your air intake is, and it will actually combust whenever it's put into the engine with gasoline. So natural gas, actually a lot of times what people will do is they'll have the car start up on gasoline, and they'll run it a little bit, and then they'll switch over to a natural gas injection, and they won't run on gasoline at all because natural gas will combust with the air, and it's a lot cheaper. Natural gas is like $1 or $2 a gallon versus $3 and $4 a gallon of gasoline. I didn't mean gallon, but you know what I'm saying. The equivalent of the energy in gasoline from natural gas is going to be $1 to $2 instead of $3 to $4 for a gallon of gas. So, natural gas is probably one of the better alternative fuels for that. There's also a thing called a radiant energy generator. This is where I go a little bit crazy on you. The cool thing about the radiant energy generators, and I know that some of them do work, and I know that some of them are complete crap. But a lot of them, they're fuelless, they're self-running. There are different types. You got Tesla's magnifying transmitter. He was a crazy guy. T. Henry had the Murray's, T. Henry Murray had the radiant energy device. Edwin Gray had the EMA motor. Paul Baumann had the Testatica machine. Okay? All of these are things that you can YouTube if you want to find out how to build them and stuff like that. Some of them are crap, some of them aren't. But all in all, there is a couple that I'd like to build just to try and see how well they work. And if you do build one that works, then it can be gathered, it just gathers energy from the environment. And it creates ordinary like the environment or ordinary electricity can be used. It's really cool. It's called fractionation. All right. So we're kind of closing this up a little bit. There are ways. Let's see. We could also use bicycle. Okay. Here's some other ways of creating electricity. I'm just talking about electricity. The bicycle can be used in conjunction with like an alternator, but if you use an alternator, you've got to provide it with DC before you can actually use it. All you got to do is provide it with a nice little jolt of DC, and then the alternator can provide its own power. So if you've got this connected to a battery bank, then it's not a problem for you. So a bicycle and an alternator. Then you've got a tape drive motor that you could use. And the alternator is going to be about $65-$70. The tape drive motor about $100-$150. Switch DC or stepper motors. This is stuff that's in computer equipment. There's a big variation in price depending on the size. And then there's this thing called a Risher and Pascal Smart Drive, and it was in washing machine manufacturers over in New Zealand. And I think that they've been adopted by Maytag appliances. But this, if you look at it, it's not a brush motor. It's not enclosed in a small little housing. It's actually, you'll see like a big plastic looking wheel, and you'll see all of the coils on this motor. You can see all of the copper coils on this motor. All right, and I've got a link on that as well. I've got a link to show you what that smart drive is. And I think you can buy that. You can buy those for about $95. And it's a pretty cool buy. And that's pretty much everything I have for this episode. And we're going on about an hour, so it's a pretty good episode. So with that, this was Ken Jensen of theprepperpodcast.com, teaching you strategies on self-reliance so that you can build a more resilient and more enjoyable life. Have a wonderful week. This is Ken, signing out.